Welcome. When it comes to climate data, trust isn't just a nice to have, it's the entire foundation of the system. So today, we're going to take a verifier's eye view of ISO 14064-3. And let's be clear, this isn't just a high-level overview. This is a masterclass for the professional who's going to one day sign their name to an assurance opinion and needs to be ready to defend it. So let's start with the big picture. You've got trillion-dollar carbon markets, you've got binding regulatory schemes, you have huge investment decisions, and all of them hinge on the integrity of greenhouse gas data. So the fundamental question is one of trust. How can anyone actually be sure the numbers are real? This is exactly the question ISO 14064-3 was written to answer. The solution, you see, is this whole ISO 14060 family of standards. Part 1 tells an organization how to count its emissions. Part 2 is for projects. But our focus, our world, is right here on ISO 14064-3. This is the rule book for us, the verifiers and validators. It's the standard that governs exactly how we provide that independent stamp of credibility. All right, so before we even think about planning a single audit activity, we have to get the foundational concepts absolutely solid. And these aren't just vocabulary words to memorize. They are the bedrock principles that ensure the integrity of every single engagement you will ever do. Okay, the first and most critical distinction you have to get right is the one between verification and validation. It's simple, but it's crucial. Verification, as you can see, looks backward. We're assessing historical data, a GHG statement about something that has already happened. In contrast, validation looks forward. We're not looking at facts, we're assessing the reasonableness of assumptions for a projected outcome. This isn't just semantics. The kind of evidence you have to gather is completely different for each. Now, pay very close attention to the word the standard uses here, shall. These 5 principles are not suggestions, they are non-negotiable commands. This is the ethical and professional bedrock of all our work. You know, impartiality isn't just about avoiding an obvious conflict of interest. It's about maintaining a mindset of professional skepticism. And the evidence-based approach, that's what makes your opinion defensible when it's put under a microscope. You really should think of these principles as your professional shield. Next up is the level of assurance. This is one of the most critical terms of engagement you'll agree on with the client, and it dictates the depth of our entire investigation. Reasonable assurance gives a high degree of confidence, and it demands a really extensive deep dive evidence gathering process. On the other hand, limited assurance provides a moderate or lower level of confidence, and it's based on less testing. So why choose one over the other? Well, a regulator might mandate reasonable, while a company's internal sustainability report might only require limited. This one decision drives everything that follows. Now let's talk about materiality. This is our threshold for what matters. It's the line in the sand where an error or a bunch of errors becomes significant enough that it could actually mislead someone reading that GHG report. A 5% quantitative threshold is a pretty common starting point, but the real art is in assessing qualitative materiality. Just imagine a company deliberately miscategorizing a source, even if the tonnage is small. That systematic failure of integrity, that is highly material, no matter what the number is. So with those foundations in place, we can move to actually planning the engagement. And let's be crystal clear, proper planning isn't just good practice. The standard mandates it as a critical risk management tool. Before you even think about signing a contract, the standard says you shall, there's that word again, run this pre-engagement gauntlet. First, does your accreditation even cover this type of work? Simple question. Second, does your team actually have the competence? Verifying a complex chemical plant requires a totally different skill set than verifying an office building. And critically, you shall safeguard impartiality. If your firm helped the client write their GHG inventory, you cannot then verify it. This is not optional, it is a firewall. Okay, let's talk about the annexes, because a smart verifier treats them as their best friend. Annex B in particular is an absolute goldmine. Think of it as your procedural playbook. It gives you a detailed walkthrough of the entire verification process. So when you're building your plan and you're not quite sure about a step, this is your first stop. It's basically the official instruction manual for putting the standards requirements into practice. The standard is very explicit. You shall create a formal verification plan. This is not some informal to-do list you jot down. It is the official roadmap for the engagement. It details your risk assessment, your sampling strategy, and the specific activities you're going to undertake. And remember, the plan itself becomes a critical piece of evidence in your audit file. And now we get to the investigation itself. This is the active hunt for sufficient and appropriate evidence to back up your final opinion. This is where a verifier's professional skepticism and analytical skills are really put to the test. A defensible conclusion is always built on this triangle of evidence. You've got your documentary evidence, the paper trail, which is essential, but it is not enough. You have to back it up with observational evidence from being on site and testimonial evidence from interviewing the key people. Because when a document, an observation, and an interview all tell you the same story, that's when you're building a truly robust and defensible conclusion. And speaking of observational evidence, this slide perfectly illustrates its power. And just note the language. The standard doesn't say you should conduct a site visit, it says you shall. There is absolutely no substitute for walking the site, seeing the equipment with your own eyes, and connecting the numbers on a spreadsheet to the physical reality of the operation. It is a non-negotiable requirement, period. So what are we looking at during the investigation? Well, this is pretty much the core analytical checklist. We are systematically assessing the client's entire GHG information system. Are the organizational boundaries right? Are their calculation methodologies appropriate for what they're doing? Is the underlying activity data reliable? We're checking every single link in the information chain, from that very first data point all the way to the final number they report. So, after all the planning and all the investigation, the entire process comes down to one single, powerful document, the verification statement. This is where you put your professional reputation on the line and you state your formal opinion. Let's look really closely at the required language here. For a reasonable assurance verification, the wording is stated positively. It says, in our opinion, the GHG statement presents fairly in all material respects. This is a direct, high-confidence statement. You are actively affirming the reliability of the data because you've gathered extensive evidence to back it up. Now, contrast that with the wording for a validation opinion. You'll see it's expressed in the negative. Nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe the assumptions are unreasonable. So why the difference? Well, it's because you can't prove a future forecast is going to be correct. You can't see the future. Instead, what you're providing assurance on is that the basis for that forecast is sound and the assumptions they used are plausible. So how do you make sure you get this precise, critical wording correct every single time? Simple. You go to Annex C. This annex provides the official templates and guidance for structuring your opinion. A lead verifier never guesses or paraphrases this stuff. You use Annex C to make sure your statement is 100% compliant with the standard. But what about those complex projects that have both historical data and future projections? Well, the standard anticipates this. Annex D provides specific guidance on how to structure what's called a mixed engagement. It shows you exactly how to issue a single compliant statement that provides a separate and distinct opinion on both the verified components and the validated components. Before your signature ever goes on that final opinion, there is one last mandatory safeguard. Your entire engagement file, including your draft opinion, shall, there it is again, undergo an independent review by a competent person in your firm who is not part of the audit team. This is a non-negotiable quality control step, and it's designed to protect objectivity and the integrity of that final opinion. So let's circle all the way back to the beginning. Why do we go through this incredibly rigorous process? Because the final defensible opinion that you sign is the linchpin of the entire system. It's what gives trust to carbon markets, it's what gives confidence to regulators, and it provides assurance to investors. Your work, quite literally, upholds the integrity of climate action itself. And that really brings us to the final critical point. Following ISO 14064-3 isn't about ticking boxes on a checklist. It's about building a robust, defensible, evidence-based file that allows you to stand behind your professional opinion with absolute confidence. Your signature is the final link in that chain of trust. So the question for every single verifier is this: have you done the work to defend